Some mornings felt heavier than others. Mikhail Petrovich, 68, sat at his kitchen table, staring into the cold remains of his coffee. Light spilled through the curtains, catching in the dust that floated lazily through the air. From the next room, the old clock ticked, a gift from colleagues when he retired from the university 5 years ago. It had been ticking ever since, filling the silence left behind. He had not spoken much in recent days, or weeks. Since Valentina's passing 3 years ago, words came less often. He kept of his books, made his walks in the park, and returned home without speaking to anyone unless absolutely necessary. His world had become smaller, quieter. That morning, he opened the hall closet, not with purpose, but out of some restless urge. The kind that came in late winter, when the snow melts but spring still feels far away. He moved aside old coats, boxes of documents, a wrapped puzzle still unopened. Then he saw it. A soft leather case, tucked beneath a folded wool scarf. Dusty, forgotten. He opened it carefully. The camera looked almost new, sleek, cool to the touch. It had been a birthday gift from Valentina just before her illness began. He'd thanked her, of course, and promised to learn how to use it. But life had shifted too quickly after that. The camera never left its case. Inside, a small note, "For your next adventure. With love, V." He sat on the edge of the bed, holding the camera in both hands. He didn't cry. He just sat there as if waiting for something, perhaps for memory to take shape. Or for courage. That afternoon, he searched online for local photography classes. One course caught his eye. Photography for beginners, no experience needed. A photo of the instructor, a woman around his age with kind eyes and a slight smile, made the idea feel less intimidating. He stared at the enrollment page for a long while. Then, almost without realizing it, he clicked join. Valentina's story, remembered. He always noticed light, I used to say. How it fell on leaves, how it moved across a face. He just never believed he could create anything himself. I gave him that camera hoping one day he'd try. The classroom smelled faintly of coffee and printer paper. Mikhail stood in the doorway, coat folded over his arm, unsure if he should step in or turn back. The chairs were already half filled, mostly with women and a few younger men, all chatting in low, comfortable voices. He felt the pull of old habits, the academic part of him noting the setup, scanning for structure, for an anchor. But this wasn't a lecture hall. No one wore suits. Some people sat cross-legged. One man in his 20s was fiddling with a tripod, and two women in the back were comparing lens sizes like they were talking about shoes. Mikhail Petrovich, a voice called gently. He turned. A woman approached, mid-50s, warm gray sweater, expressive eyes. She extended her hand with a calm confidence. "I'm Anna Sergeyevna, so glad you made it." Her handshake was firm, her smile sincere. He nodded awkwardly. "I wasn't sure I belonged," he said before he could stop himself. She tilted her head, amused. "You've got a camera, you belong." She motioned toward a chair near the window. "Sit where the light inspires you." He chose the seat by instinct, grateful for something to do with his hands. He set the camera down carefully, as though it might still bite. Anna introduced herself to the group, explaining how the course would focus on the basics: composition, light, shadow, mood. Then she asked everyone to go around and say their name, what brought them there, and their favorite photo they'd ever seen. When it was his turn, Mikhail felt his heart beat louder. "My name is Mikhail," he said, voice steadier than he expected. "I'm recently retired. I found this camera in a closet and thought I'd give it a try." "And your favorite photo?" Anna prompted gently. He thought for a moment. "There's a photo of my wife. She's laughing, looking off to the side. It wasn't posed, just real." There was a quiet nod from Anna. "That's what we're after." After class, a woman from the second row approached him, short dark hair, warm coat, no makeup. "I liked what you said," she offered. "About the photo of your wife." "I'm Elena." He smiled, unsure what to say. She added, "It's nice to see someone here who remembers film." He chuckled. "It's been a while since I remembered much of anything outside of books." They spoke for a few minutes, mostly about lenses, but Mikhail noticed something else, a shift. He was being listened to, not out of politeness, but with interest. Elena's story, age 55. It was his quiet that stood out. So many people fill silence with noise. He didn't. And when he spoke about that photo, well, it stayed with me. By the third lesson, Mikhail began to notice things, subtle things. A glance held just a second longer than necessary. A hand brushing his arm as someone leaned past him to reach a lens cloth. A soft laugh directed more at him than the group. At first, he dismissed it. Politeness, surely. He was the oldest person in the class by a decade or more. People often smiled at older men out of kindness, didn't they? But then came Elena. She seemed to gravitate toward him, not obviously, but gently. She asked him how he was finding the course, what kinds of photographs he liked, if he'd ever tried portraits. After one session, she lingered while they packed up their things. "You always notice something I miss," she said, tilting her head. "You see in layers." Mikhail didn't know how to answer. The compliment felt too direct, almost personal. "I just look," he said quietly, "maybe more slowly than others." "That's not a bad thing." Another time, she laughed at something he said, not one of his better remarks, just a dry aside about the unpredictable Moscow light. But her laugh was real, not polite. Warm, like sunlight finding a break in the clouds. Anna Sergeyevna also began to ask for his opinion during lessons. "Mikhail Petrovich, what do you see in this image?" she asked, pointing to a student's photo on the projector. He hesitated, then spoke. "There's something honest about it, like the subject didn't know they were being watched." Anna nodded. "Yes, that's an eye trained by observation, not technique." The others began to listen when he spoke, not as they might listen to a lecturer, but with curiosity. It was disarming. One evening, as he walked home through the park, Mikhail caught sight of himself in a shop window. His reflection stood straighter than he remembered. Something in his posture had shifted, nothing dramatic, just the absence of slump. He had always thought of himself as invisible in a crowd. Now he wasn't so sure. Elena's story, age 55. There's a quiet steadiness in him, like a lighthouse. You don't notice it right away, but once you do, you start looking for it again. It started with a simple question. A young man, dimmer, perhaps 23, held up his photo and asked, "Mikhail Petrovich, does this feel too staged?" Mikhail leaned in. The image was of a woman on a bench, mid-laugh, sunlight brushing the edge of her cheek. "No," Mikhail said slowly, "but maybe it's too perfect. Life usually leaves a bit of mess in the corners." Dimmer blinked, then smiled. "That's good, that helps." From then on, questions found their way to him. How do you make someone feel comfortable in front of the lens? When do you know a photo is finished? Have you ever regretted not taking a picture? Mikhail answered as best he could, always surprised that they asked. He had no credentials in photography, only fresh curiosity and a lifetime of watching. At first, he thought they were just being deferential. He was older after all. But the questions kept coming, not only about photographs. One evening after class, a woman named Irina stopped him by the coat rack. "You seem calm," she said. "How do you stay that way?" He chuckled. "Do I?" "Yes, like nothing could shake you." He hesitated. "I'd already lost what mattered most, so the rest, I suppose I carry it differently now." Irina didn't reply immediately. Then she nodded, her expression soft. That makes sense. It struck him later, these people weren't looking for expertise. They were looking for grounding. He had not realized he carried any. Anna Sergeyevna noticed too. After one session, she caught him on the way out. "They listen to you," she said, "not just with respect, but attention. You give them space to think." He shook his head. "I'm just an old man with a camera." She smiled. "Perhaps, but you're also someone who knows the value of silence. That's rare." Mikhail thought of Valentina. She had always insisted he had something to offer others. He had laughed it off. Now her voice came back, not as memory, but as presence. Mikhail's note, unwritten. "I never planned to guide anyone. I'm still learning how to guide myself. But maybe that's what makes advice honest, not offering answers, just being willing to walk beside someone for a moment." It was a passing comment. "You look good in dark blue," Elena said one afternoon as they left the photography center together. "Not the navy kind, something softer like slate." Mikhail blinked. "I haven't bought new clothes in years." She gave a small smile. Maybe it's time. He laughed it off, but her words lingered. That night, standing in front of the mirror, he really looked at himself. Grey sweater, worn collar, trousers a little too loose. Serviceable. Neutral. Invisible. The next day, instead of going straight home, he turned and walked toward the city center. The shop windows had always seemed designed for younger people, with their sleek mannequins and loud music. But one storefront caught his eye. Simple, quiet, almost old-fashioned. He stepped inside. A young sales assistant approached, polite and quick to judge his hesitancy. Looking for something special. He started to shake his head, then stopped. A shirt, he said, something new. She led him through racks of cotton and linen. He gravitated toward grey again, but paused when his fingers brushed over a soft blue button-up. Not too dark, not too light. Try this, the assistant said. It suits your eyes. He did, and it did. For the first time in a long while, Mikhail noticed something strange in the mirror. Not youth, not transformation, but presence. He looked like someone who'd decided to show up for his own life. The next photography class, he wore the shirt with his usual coat. Nothing dramatic, but the effect was immediate. Elena raised an eyebrow. You listened. He gave a half smile. I'm learning. Even Anna paused during the class, her eyes flickering with something like approval. Later that evening, as the group reviewed each other's portraits, someone asked Mikhail to sit for a candid shot. He agreed, and for once, didn't shift uncomfortably in his chair. When he saw the photo afterward, creased lines, quiet eyes, the blue shirt softening his face, he didn't wince. He nodded. That's me. Mikhail's reflection. I used to think caring about clothes was vanity, but maybe it's also a way of saying I'm still here. I still matter. I'm not done. The day of the park exhibition arrived with bright skies and a hint of wind that kept tugging at the photo displays like curious fingers. The city had allowed the photography group to hang their prints along a quiet stretch of the boulevard between two rows of budding trees. Passers-by strolled slowly, pausing, pointing, commenting in soft tones. Mikhail arrived early. He carried a folder with 6 printed images, his final selections. They weren't dramatic. A man reading alone on a bench. A woman lighting a candle at dusk. The way sunlight filtered through an open market stall. Ordinary moments, but he had caught them honestly. He pinned them up with steady hands, then stepped back. For a while, he simply watched. People stopped. Looked. Some leaned closer. One woman even called her friend over to point out a detail in one of his photos. He didn't say anything. He just stood quietly behind the displays, unsure whether to feel proud or exposed. Anna Sergeyevna found him there. Your work draws people in, she said. He smiled modestly. They don't even know it's mine. They don't need to, she said. The photographs speak. They walked together for a while. She paused at his photo of the older woman lighting a candle. There's tenderness in this, and strength. He glanced at her. It's what I saw. And what you carry, she replied. People respond to it. They stood in silence for a moment, then she added gently, attractiveness isn't always about age or appearance. Sometimes it's about how a person pays attention. You make others feel seen. Mikhail didn't know how to answer. Not because he disagreed, but because the words landed somewhere deep. He remembered Valentina saying something similar long ago. You have a way of noticing things most people miss. Back then, he hadn't believed her. Later in the afternoon, Elena arrived. She wore a scarf the color of autumn leaves. They walked through the rows together. She lingered longest in front of his images. You have a kind eye, she said. I try to see what's really there, he replied. And people feel it. Elena's story continued. There's a stillness to him, but not emptiness. Like a stone warmed by the sun, it holds heat longer than you expect. Elena's invitation came casually. We could have dinner sometime, she said, folding her scarf after class. Nothing fancy. I make a good soup. Mikhail hesitated. It had been years since he'd shared a meal at someone else's home, other than holidays, and those had grown quieter over time. Still, he found himself nodding. Soup sounds good. She lived in a modest apartment on the 3rd floor, full of warm light and bookshelves that bent slightly under their weight. A radio played something classical in the background. The smell of garlic and parsley greeted him before the door fully opened. "You came," she said simply with a soft smile. They ate in the kitchen. The soup was thick, with lentils and vegetables, the kind that tasted better with company. She had set out fresh bread and 2 glasses of dark red wine. Conversation drifted easily, from the course, to music, to childhood memories. At one point, she asked about Valentina. He told her, not everything, but enough. How they met at the university. How she used to take photographs of strangers without them noticing. How she once convinced him to dance in the street because the weather was too beautiful to waste. Elena listened, not with pity, but with presence. Then she said, "She must have seen something wonderful in you." "I'm not sure what," he answered honestly. "I am," she said, and didn't explain further. Later, as he described an old professor who had fallen asleep mid-lecture and kept teaching in his dreams, Mikhail mimicked the voice with such dry seriousness that Elena burst out laughing, real laughter, the kind that shakes the shoulders and makes you forget to be careful. Mikhail laughed too, though part of him watched the moment unfold like a photograph. Her eyes shining, her hand resting lightly near his, the way the air between them warmed without needing to be named. He hadn't known if he could ever be this version of himself again, relaxed, humorous, noticed. Elena's memory. He made me laugh without trying to be clever, just by being exactly who he was. I'd forgotten how rare that is. It happened quietly, like most real changes do. Mikhail was getting ready for class, nothing unusual. He reached for his coat, smoothed down the front of his shirt, and turned toward the hallway mirror. For a moment, he didn't recognize himself. Not because he looked younger. He didn't. His face still carried its years, creases around the eyes, silver at the temples, the slight stack at the jaw. But something had shifted, his posture, the way he stood, the way his gaze met his own. He didn't flinch. For so long, mirrors had been a formality, something to check for crumbs or crooked collars. He'd stopped seeing himself after Valentina died. What was the point? But now he looked. He noticed the firmness in his jawline, the steadiness in his eyes. There was a richness to his face, the kind that doesn't come from creams or surgery or perfect lighting. It came from years lived, losses endured, and choices made quietly, without applause. He leaned in slightly. Is this what other people see when they look at me? He thought of Elena's laugh, Anna's soft praise, the way strangers had paused in front of his photographs. He remembered the quiet nods from younger students, the way they waited for his thoughts before speaking their own. He had assumed it was all kindness. Now he wasn't so sure. Maybe, just maybe, they saw something he was only beginning to recognize himself. Later that day, while out photographing in the park, he took a self-portrait, nothing staged. He set the camera on a bench, framed the shot, and pressed the timer. He didn't pose. He just stood there as he was. When he reviewed the image at home, he paused. There was no smile, but there was presence, a quiet confidence, the kind of look that came from someone who no longer needed to prove anything. He printed the photo and slid it into a frame he'd found at the back of the closet, wooden, slightly worn, but still solid. Mikhail's private thought. I used to think mirrors only reflected the surface, but now I see they can also show you who you've become, if you're ready to look. The gallery was modest, just a sunlit room in the local community center, with cream walls and wide windows that opened to the sound of early spring birdsong. But to Mikhail, it might as well have been the Tretiakov. He had hung each photo himself that morning. Portraits of classmates and quiet strangers, of older faces lit with joy or depth or stillness. The exhibition title, printed neatly above the entrance, read, "The Beauty of Age." People filtered in slowly. Some familiar, Anna, Dima, Irina, Elena. Others were visitors, drawn by curiosity. Mikhail stood near the doorway at first, unsure whether to hover or vanish. But as the room filled, a strange thing happened. He began to feel calm. One woman paused in front of a black and white portrait of an elderly man holding a cracked teacup. "There's something dignified in this," she murmured, like he's been through something and chose to stay kind. Mikhail stepped closer. "That's Grigory Ivanovich. He repairs umbrellas in the alley behind the market." She turned to him. "You made him unforgettable." He smiled. When it was time for the short speech, Anna gently motioned him forward. Mikhail cleared his throat, the microphone unfamiliar in his hand. "I didn't know I was looking for anything," he began. "Not when I picked up a camera. Not when I walked into that first class." He paused. The room was quiet, attentive. "I thought age made you less visible. I thought, after a certain point, the world stopped looking your way. But I was wrong." He glanced at the photos on the wall, creased faces, soft hands, laughter lines, defiant eyes. "There's a kind of beauty that doesn't ask for attention. It just waits until someone's ready to see it." He caught Elena's gaze. She stood near the back, arms folded loosely, her expression open proud. "I've been lucky," he finished, "to find people who reminded me that life doesn't stop offering new things, even when you think it's done." Applause followed, warm, not formal. Someone handed him a glass of juice. Someone else asked for a tour of the exhibit. He felt light, rooted, entirely himself. Afterward, as the crowd thinned, Elena came to stand beside him. She didn't speak at first. She just took his hand. He didn't let go. Elena's voice. He didn't need to impress anyone. He just showed up fully, and that, more than anything, made him unforgettable.